We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer. It's time to bring in our Law&Crime reporter who is in the courtroom to give us the very latest. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so before we jump into the case, I want to tell you about something else real quick. We have this brand new podcast that we just dropped on Wondery Plus. It's called Karen the Retrial. It's about Karen Read. Shocker. It's the best place for a recap of everything going on in the Karen Read case, everything going on in her retrial that's literally happening right now, by the way, and what's to come as the new trial heats up. So you can find Karen the Retrial exclusively on the Wondery app or an Apple Podcast. Click the link in our description below to listen now. Hope you can check it out. Okay, back to the case. All right, so we got another Sean Diddy Combs court hearing recap that just happened today. And remember, this is an interesting moment. Remember, the juror questionnaires have already been submitted to a number of prospective jurors. We believe the official jury selection process is going to begin next week, May 5th. And let's not forget what we're talking about here. This is Sean Combs' criminal case. He faces 5 sex crimes-related charges: sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution, that Combs allegedly ran this criminal enterprise, that he engaged in a pattern of years-long abuse against women, forcing them into sexual episodes, bringing in sex workers, all of those allegations. And I will tell you, I said it before, I say it again, I think that this is incredible that this is happening so soon. It is remarkable that we are seeing a federal trial, a case going to trial within less than a year of when he was arrested. But by all accounts, the defense has wanted this to go forward. They want this trial to move forward. It seems by all accounts they believe they can get an acquittal here. We shall see. But right now, we want to do a recap of what happened in court today as this trial is about to begin. So straight from the courtroom, actually outside of the federal courthouse right now in downtown New York, we have with us once again Law&Crime's reporter Elizabeth Millner. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to start right from how we always start our recaps. How did Sean Combs look? How did he appear? And who was there for him on his side?
Oh yeah, Jesse, it seems like the weight is kind of now on Diddy's shoulders as he's set to start trial technically on Monday with jury selection and obviously with the following week being opening statements. But when he walked into the courtroom today, he did what he usually does. He kind of does an eye over the entire gallery, sees who's in there, makes eye contact with a lot of us, which I thought was a little surprising, especially us being members of the press. He kind of looked at each and every one of us. There was an anchor there with Fox 5 who I think he had a previous professional relationship with, kind of looked and waved at her. So, you know, he's seeing familiar faces inside the courtroom. Now, as far as those who were there to support him, that was a little different than it's been in past hearings. So when we first started covering those hearings and when I was first going into those courthouse for these pretrial hearings, his entire family there was in the gallery, probably with the exception of his 2-year-old daughter, whose name is Love. But for the most part, we saw his daughters in there, we saw his sons in there, we saw his mother in there. But this time around, and maybe it was just because this is another pretrial hearing, they're in it for another 2 months when it comes to actual trial, but none of his family was there today. And I think, not sure if he's actually aware that they weren't going to be coming today, but I think maybe there was a little disappointment there because I think he kind of lights up when he sees his sons in the courtroom, especially when he sees his mother in the courtroom. But this time was a little different. The only person who was really there on Diddy's side today, as outside of his lawyers, was really just one of his associates, I believe it is. And this is a man who we had previously talked about, Jesse. He was the one wearing the free puff sweatshirt inside that courtroom, which he won't be allowed to do once trial actually begins. But he was wearing it again today. And apparently, because TMZ caught him outside of the courthouse, ran up to him, and he was like, they're coming out with a line of this. So look out for that clothing line to begin. But that was really the only person on his side today. And it was pretty surprising. But I'm sure once trial actually begins, once opening statements begins, we will probably see the whole entire family there. But nope, it just seems like it kept dwindling and dwindling each and every single hearing.
Little inside baseball, by the way, when we do these Diddy hearing recaps, we are scrambling. We're trying to get as much information as possible out to you as quickly as possible. This is kind of like breaking news. So I'm working through lunch, I'm working through snacks, but I kind of want to eat healthy. It's important to me. But I'll tell you what, shopping for healthy food is not easy. It's tough to know what's actually good for you, but that is why I am so happy Thrive Market is now sponsoring Sidebar. Why? Thrive Market is a go-to online grocery store for getting healthy essentials. And one of the things I love is their shopping experience. As a Thrive Market member, you can customize the assortment of products in just a few clicks based on your preferences and diet. You can filter the products to get exactly what you're looking for. Like instead of chomping on candy, I found these amazing organic avocado oil chips that are perfect for a midday snack. Also, they're super eco-conscious with all their products shipped from their zero-waste warehouses. Everything is delivered straight to your door, so you don't even have to leave the house. If you're ready to make healthy food shopping as easy as a few clicks, check out Thrive Market, scan the QR code on screen, and click the link in the description, or head over to thrivemarket.com/sidebar to get 30% off of your first order. And by the way, a free gift when you join Thrive Market today. Okay, I want to talk about his appearance though, right? Last time we spoke, you say he was quite gray. I imagine he looks the same, but there's been a lot of discussion, actually a ruling from the judge regarding what Sean Combs can wear in court. So talk to us about what that ruling was, what he can wear, and how was he dressed? How did he look?
Well, going back to your first point about him being gray, that's still there. He still has a lot of gray hair. And, you know, I hate to make this comparison, but he does have kind of similar hair to Brian Steele at this point. It's very light colored. Not sure if he's dyed it beforehand, but you can see, and you can just kind of by his demeanor, that he's kind of visibly aged since he's been behind bars, and that's, you know, apparent. He's been behind bars, a place that he probably never thought he would be for a long time or ever in his entire life, but he's been there for a significant amount of time. But he came in as usual with his khaki jumpsuit, the MDC edition of that. But as far as what he'll be wearing at trial, that'll be completely different. So what the judge ruled about in trial is that Diddy is allowed 5 button-up shirts. He's allowed 5 sweaters, which I thought was interesting because I would think that he'd be allowed to wear suits. But from the judge's order, it seemed like it's really just button-up shirts, sweaters, up to 5 pairs of pants. I think it's up to 5 pairs of socks, and then 2 pairs of shoes. But because he is still a detainee, those shoes cannot come with laces. So I'm sure that Diddy will kind of be pulling the ranks when it comes to fashion, especially once his trial begins, probably with button-up shirts and sweaters, probably more than my rent. But as far as the judge's order, it looks like that'll be kind of the standard issue from how we'll see Diddy once trial begins.
That's funny. Let me ask you this, Elizabeth. A lot of talk about jury selection. I keep getting asked the question, how on earth can you possibly get a jury in this case? People that don't know Sean Combs, I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think they expect people to know who he is. I think they expect people to know about the news of his arrest and maybe the charges that he faces. The question will become, can you find jurors who are impartial, who can agree and promise that they will only look at the facts and the law presented in that courtroom to make their decision? Easier said than done. What is the status of jury selection? And by that I mean this week was an important week. Talk to us about what we've learned so far about the jury selection process and what we can expect. What happened today in court? What was the discussion about jury selection moving forward?
Well, what we can expect is that jury selection is planning to start on schedule on Monday. That's going to be May 5th, beginning. They want the judge wants the parties to be in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, mind you, the federal courthouse doesn't open until 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time. Given just that everyone knows who Sean Diddy Combs is. But again, both sides seem confident that they'll be able to handle it. The judge was a little worried about the process probably taking longer than he intended, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But as far as jury selection goes, the process seems pretty clear-cut. They plan on questioning about 50 jurors a day. So what happens is when we're up in the courtroom, we're normally in like 26A, 26B, so it's all the way at the top of the federal courthouse. And what the judge is proposing is that these jurors will be brought in. Again, it's planning to be about 50 a day. They'll bring them up to 26A, and then that's where the questionnaires will kind of start. Now, as far as 26B, they plan on utilizing both of those courtrooms, which are pretty large courtrooms, so it can easily fit about 50 prospective jurors, but they plan on using 26B to kind of ask about those tougher questions. That's going to be the questions about the medical history, previous abuse, just those really tough questions. And their goal is to have to keep around 40 jurors that aren't excused for cause. So they plan on kind of doing this pretty quickly. And the government's response was they wanted kind of slightly more than about 40 jurors, and they want 2 attorneys to be brought in from each side, and the judge said yes. And that, when I say each side, going into those sequestered areas when, again, those tough questions are going to be asked, which the defense is expecting for people to be very candid when it comes to answering these types of questions, which can be pretty hard, right? Like, think about it. Someone's asking you about your medical history. Someone's asking you about previous physical, sexual abuse, that type of thing, and you're expected to kind of tell this essentially to a stranger. But again, you know, on both sides, I understand kind of the reasoning for it. They just want to make sure that everything is very clear cut and they have the right jurors to be seated in that jury box. Now, the defense did kind of have a little bit of an objection when it came to the sequestration and the sequestered questions, I should say. And that was just that the defense wants Diddy to be inside there. But the problem comes with Diddy being there is that these are in 2 different courtrooms. He is still a detainee. So they were talking about how the marshals would kind of take him back and forth, which could be a security risk. It could be just a terrible risk for the officials to have that even going on. And so they kind of came to a solution, is that Diddy will be shown a feed. He'll be able to kind of hear those personal questions that are being asked during the sequestration, and that's kind of the resolution that both sides ended up agreeing to. So Diddy will stay in the main courtroom. There won't be that back and forth as far as him going to another courtroom and marshals have to kind of make sure everything's squared away. That won't be happening in this case. But again, it all plans to start on Monday, May 5th, and again, it plans on starting bright and early. Now, whether or not they'll actually seat the entire jury in 3 days, that's a little wait and see, but I guess we'll see come Monday what it's looking like and how successful the process really is.
And they, you know, each side's going to have strikes and things of that nature. My understanding also was in court today, his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had raised a concern about what happens if jurors saw something, did something, said something between when they filled out the questionnaire and when they're being questioned, right? I mean, I guess talk to me what we learned about that, but also, do we have any idea what the final questions were in this questionnaire?
So to answer that last question, no, unfortunately, I don't know what's in that final version of the questionnaire, but I do have some of the proposed questions that the defense team kind of proposed to. It was interesting questions. What's your age? What's your sex, your gender identity? Do you have children? Are you currently working? What's the highest level of education that you have had? One thing I thought was interesting is, do you use any social media platforms? If so, which ones? How do you get your news? What, if any, newspapers, magazines, websites, online news services or publications do you read? Do you listen to any podcasts? So possibly if you're listening to Sidebar, you might not be able to be on this jury or anything like that. As far as, you know, they asked what type of music do you like? How often do you listen to music? Which I'm just like, what is that necessarily relevant? And then even on the government side, they had questions such as, you know, you may hear evidence in this case related to sexual assault, including rape. Do you have any feelings, beliefs, or experiences relating to that aspect of the case that could affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this case? You may hear evidence in this case relating to payment of commercial sex workers in exchange for sex. Do you have feelings, beliefs, or experiences relating to prostitution and the law enforcement around prostitution that could affect your ability to be a fair, impartial juror in this case? So that was just kind of a glimpse of what jurors can expect to be asked during this questionnaire. Now, as far as just going back to your first question, actually, there was just that proposed question that we can say is going to be on that questionnaire now, is the defense wanted to propose a question on, after the potential jurors filled out their questionnaire, have they seen any news media, any documentaries, anything just relating to to a news medium and whether or not they saw it in between them filling out the questionnaire to Monday morning when they go to jury selection. So essentially meaning if they filled out the questionnaire on Friday, but on a Sunday they watched, the fall of Diddy on docuseries, or they watched the crime episode of Diddy, and that type of sort. And so Mark Agnifilo just kind of wanted to cross his T's and dot his I's as far as that question goes, because it seems like they're being very cognizant of the fact that these potential jurors could already have certain views in their head based off what they've seen in the news media, what they've seen or heard about in podcasts or read about in a news article, that type of sort. So it seems like that was kind of the question that we know for sure will definitely be on that questionnaire, or that will be asked to those potential jurors.
You mentioned Sidebar, which is interesting because my understanding was also today there was a discussion about sidebars. No, not Sidebar with Jesse Weber, not our show, but actual sidebars when there's that break in the court and the attorneys go up to the judge to have a private conversation about an issue. What was the discussion about that? And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, which is so good that you're our eyes and our ears, because we don't know what the actual reporting indicates, so you will set us straight for it. Was there also a discussion regarding the sidebars that had something to do with Ghislaine Maxwell? Talk to us about this.
So the Ghislaine Maxwell mention was just kind of about the jury selection process, that it's going to be that sequestered questioning type of thing, and just whether or not the defendant should be transported back and forth in between these courtrooms. Because, despite what people may think about Sean Diddy Combs, is that he does have a right to a fair trial. And that's what the defense was pretty much hammering about, is the sense that they don't think it's fair that Diddy wouldn't be a part of the sequestered questioning process, but he is, and he came up with that solution, as we had mentioned. Now, as it comes to these sidebars, that was also about, the jury selection process. So pretty much when it comes to, again, those medical issues, those really tough personal questions about previous abuse and other sensitive topics, that'll be handled in private, as we know. And then what would happen to kind of ease the process and make it go a little faster is that pretty much they would go into a sidebar. They would listen to just what the arguments are just from the judge, those two representatives from each side, and this potential juror. They could talk about what the issues are that they may have about being selected on the jury and that type of sort. And then what the judge came up with, the solution is, or really it was kind of the government's proposal here, but what they came up with is that they'll seal it in the transcript. So there are going to be transcripts of this trial, but the portions about, a potential or prospective juror and their medical history, all that sensitive stuff, that'll be sealed in the transcript. And then they'll just kind of resume questioning, which, again, the judge kind of made this a point, too, talking about, okay, well, if we're going to continue to do sidebars each and every single time that a prospective juror has to talk about a sensitive topic, that could take up a lot of time. But, again, the defense and the government both seem pretty confident that they'll still be able to kind of get it going at a quick pace. This isn't unusual to do in these types of high-profile cases. So that was pretty much just the topics about, Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as the other topics about the sidebars that aren't presented by Jesse Weber.
Was there a discussion today about the defense expanding the team of lawyers?
There definitely was. And I know, Jesse, we had been talking about this for a while. We thought it was possibly that expansion going to be Mark Garagos added to the team. There was an exclusive reporting. The rumors were spreading that he would be there, which is funny enough because his daughter is also on the defense team. She works with Mark Agnifilo and has been representing Sean Diddy Combs since the beginning, since his arrest and since his indictment. But it was interesting that the defense kind of pointed out that they will be adding 2 defense attorneys. We only thought initially it was 1. But one thing that stood out to me when Mark Agnifilo was talking about this was he said that these defense attorneys are in the courtroom right now. I didn't see Mark Garagos in that courtroom, but what I did see is 2 defense attorneys that have been there when Brian Steele came on board. And those 2 defense attorneys were Nicole Westmoreland, who we talked about in that last sidebar episode that I did with you. She had previously represented a YSL defendant. Now, this is me speculating. Let me just kind of put the red tape on that right there, where this is me speculating, but these were the names that kind of stood out to me as possibly who could be added to the defense team, especially knowing that they have that prior relationship with Brian Steele, who we know is added onto the Diddy defense team just a couple weeks ago. So me guessing, I think it's Nicole Westmoreland, who again previously worked with Brian Steele on the YSL case. She previously represented a YSL defendant. And then I also think it might possibly be Xavier Donaldson. Now, he's a New York-based attorney. He has been in the courtroom a couple of times, at least for the maybe last 4 or 5 hearings that I've been to. He's been in the gallery, kind of taking notes, kind of watching what was going on, but always sitting on the defense's side, kind of making nice with the defense attorneys there. So I think it might possibly be those 2 attorneys added to the list. But again, with Mark Agnifilo saying that these 2 lawyers are in the courtroom, there were other lawyers in there as well, too. So I might just be completely wrong. But I will say for certain, let me not say for certain, but I don't think it's going to be Mark Garagos.
All right. We'll see. You know, it's interesting when we're talking about this because you had talked about our previous sidebar about the legal team. A big issue that came up last time. A lot of people talking about it. We covered on Sidebar. There's been a lot of news articles about it. Was whether or not Sean Combs had rejected a plea deal from the government. And I understand that there was a further discussion about that today, which, by the way, is really interesting. Because I've said it from the beginning, I never saw him wanting to take a deal. The reason that he wanted to go to trial so quickly is because he doesn't want to sit behind bars any longer. It seems to me he believes he can be acquitted, take this to trial. If he made bail, he probably would have pushed this off as far as possible. He probably wouldn't have wanted to go to trial immediately, but because he's sitting behind bars, he's locked up at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, it seems he wanted to go to trial as soon as possible. So, talk to us, but then on the other side, you have to think about mounting evidence that they might have against him, what he's potentially facing, decades in prison, life in prison, would he take a plea? What was the discussion today regarding a possible plea offer?
The judge didn't go into not really the judge, the government didn't go into too many details about the extent of the plea offer, but one thing that they had said was pretty much that under the plea offer, he would be facing less time than he's facing if he would have gone to trial. So when the allocution portion came, Diddy stood up, the judge kind of read him everything that he had needed to read to him, just about whether or not he was of sound mind, whether or not he had taken drugs or alcohol in the last 24 hours, which Diddy did say no about. But as far as the plea offer that came up in the last hearing where the government said we did offer him a deal or an offer, I should say, and that he rejected it. And now it's official, and he said it to the court as well, too. You know, he stood up, he said that he consulted with this about his attorneys, and it seems like they're planning, or not even seems like they're rolling the dice by going to trial because, again, Jesse, we've been talking about this, just how confident the defense appears that, you know, they could get off on these charges. They could be acquitted or possibly, you know, who knows what could happen just because, again, you are rolling the dice. This really does feel like just kind of like, you know, just kind of like a gambling a little bit with Diddy's life in a sense, just because, you know, if you're offered maybe X amount of time versus this huge amount of time, which could be, you know, years and decades behind bars, you would think possibly, you know, it's the federal government building a case against you. Maybe you would go for the lesser offer, but again, that would be having to admit that he did something wrong. And the defense has always maintained that he is innocent. He has done nothing wrong, that this is just, you know, these are just ex-girlfriends that are mad at, like just all these types of things that the defense is arguing. But again, today, and it made it official that Diddy rejected the plea offer, and he will be going on trial for the charges that he's facing right now, which again could have him in prison, not even detention, for years.
I tell you this, even though that happened, it's not outside the realm of possibility that he could end up taking a plea. If he, you know, how many times have we covered cases before? We're about to go to the start of trial, like, you know, the opening of jury selection, the beginning of opening statements, the defendant takes a plea, or some evidence is presented during the course of the case, and they say, you know what, let's not go to trial. Let's stop this trial right now. I want to enter a guilty plea, particularly if a really bad piece of evidence comes in or they don't feel that their arguments against it were effective. It's not outside the realm of possibility. So I just want to keep that in mind as this progresses. Now, gag order. There's been a gag order in this case. Was there discussion today about a violation of the gag order?
Well, there was A little bit, and it was brought up towards the end of court. So pretty much it was a defense argument that was made, and it had to pertain to victim one, who we believe to be Cassandra Ventura. But what was interesting about this argument is that the defense was talking about Lisa Bloom. And Lisa Bloom, who we all know to be Gloria Allred's daughter, she has represented other accusers of Sean Diddy Combs, including Dawn Richard, who worked with Danity Kane. She was a bandmate there and then went on to do Dirty Money, who was Diddy's group as well too. And so pretty much the defense was just disturbed, and this was a word that they had used. They called it disturbing that she was going on and doing a documentary, the BBC documentary about Diddy's life. Pretty much they were saying that it could violate rules of professional conduct, and the judge said that, he seemed to be taking this kind of matter seriously. Now, I will just kind of preface it and say it. I haven't seen the documentary, but it's not out of the realm, or it's not out of the norm that she even went on this documentary as well, too, because she had previously gone on another documentary and kind of talked about her client's accusations against Diddy as well, too. So I was surprised that they brought up this particular documentary. Again, I don't know the extent of what she had said, but the defense seemed very annoyed in a way, and annoyed by the fact that she had gone onto this documentary and just kind of was talking about it, and they were just worried about how prejudicial her comments were that she had made on this documentary were against the defense's client, that being Diddy. And so the judge again seemed to be taking that matter pretty seriously and just pretty much said that everyone, the attorneys, the witnesses' attorneys, the accusers' attorneys, they all have to adhere to these professional rules. They all have to adhere to this professional conduct. And if this continues, and if more things are said that get onto the judge's radar, pretty much Judge Submaranian said that he'll take appropriate action if this type of conduct does continue. So we'll see what happens with that, but it seems like the judge was pretty, no nonsense about this. He doesn't want anything crazy to be happening when it comes to this case, so he'll take it up if, he needs to.
Of course, there's a lot at stake here, but I've always wondered whether or not Dawn Richard would actually testify in this case, because we know that she sued Sean Combs. And remember what the indictment says. One of the things one of the new indictments says is there is a forced labor allegation. It's a predicate crime for the racketeering conspiracy. And I'm going to read it directly from the indictment. Combs, along with members and associates of the enterprise, also maintained control over certain employees of the Combs business, whom he forced to work long hours with little sleep through use of, among other things, physical force, psychological harm, financial harm, reputational harm, and or threats of the same. In doing so, Combs, assisted by members and associates of the enterprise, caused these employees to believe they would be harmed, including by losing their jobs if they did not comply with his demands. With respect to one employee, Combs used physical force, psychological harm, financial harm, reputational harm, and or threats of the same to cause the employee to engage in sex acts with Combs. Now, I go back to her complaint that was filed in September of 2024. It reads, throughout the productions of Making the Bands 3 and 4, Mr. Combs deprived Miss Richard and her Danity Kane bandmates of basic needs such as adequate food and sleep. When Miss Richard or her Danity Kane bandmates requested meals or rest, Mr. Combs refused and chastised them with derogatory comments like, "You bleeps don't want this," or "You're all not hungry enough, and I'm paying you bleeps to work." Now, just to be clear, Elizabeth, there is no indication other than that Dawn Richard's going to be a part of this criminal case, right?
Yeah, no indication other than that. And it's interesting that you brought that indictment up as well, too, Jesse, because in my mind, I was always thinking it was just one of his general employees, not thinking in my mind that it possibly could be talking about one of his musical artists or one of his recording artists. And, there have always been rumors that have also played out in civil lawsuits just about Diddy's treatment of the people that he manages, the artists that he takes under his wing. And then that was all laid out in various different lawsuits. So it's interesting that you bring that up. But also when it comes to Dawn Richard specifically, there was no indication that she'd actually be a witness or a victim in this case, an alleged victim in this case, because remember, alleged victim 1 through 3 are they being the defense has said and painted it out to be that these were just ex-girlfriends. Then you have alleged victim number 4, who again, according to the indictment, worked under Diddy. And then you have, the talks about the alleged victim 5 as well, too, none of which were brought up in court today. But it's possible that she could testify. I mean, she worked very closely with Diddy for a number of years. Again, she went from Danity Kane to Dirty Money, which was a band where she worked directly with Diddy. She said, according to her civil lawsuit, that she had witnessed Diddy being physically abusive to Cassandra Ventura. And so there are all these things that are adding up that it wouldn't be surprising that she would testify. I would expect her to testify. So we'll see what happens. But again, as far as the defense and the government's arguments, they haven't made it very clear that it would be her specifically as one of the alleged victims. But it's possible she could just be a witness for the government, possibly.
Elizabeth, so much of this case we don't know about. We don't know. So much has been redacted. So much has been blocked out. There's only being identified right now as victims 1 through 5. We know that victim 1, who we believe to be Cassandra Ventura, indicated that she will testify using her real name, not a pseudonym, not like Jane Doe. There's another victim who just came out this week saying the same thing, right?
There was, and that was put in the filing today. Kind of went under my radar for just a second till I was kind of printing out all the documents I needed for court today. But alleged victim number 3, and again, the alleged victims in this case weren't brought up in court today, but alleged victim 3 is somebody that both sides have talked about previously. Now, the defense in a previous hearing said that victim 3 kind of felt meh about testifying against Diddy, because again, this will be a government witness. But when defense spoke with alleged victim 3's counsel, the words that were used were meh, and that's about how she feels about testifying and getting her name out there. And so pretty much the defense said, this person has allegedly gone on other podcasts, has already talked about her experience with Diddy and that sort. So, of course, we don't know exactly who that person is or anything like that. And obviously, if we do know who that person is, we're not going to name who that person is until that person gets up on that stand, puts up their right hand, swears on that Bible, and is ready to testify. But it does look like, according to the government's filing, because that was the government who made this order, talking about alleged victim 3 is fine using her name, because we do know it is a she, but whoever this woman is, she will be using her real name.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting, to say the least. And I mean, we're here, May 5th. This is the date that we have been waiting for. This is going to be a very interesting trial. There are no cameras in that courtroom, but we have Elizabeth Millner, who's going to be there. Our plan, as much as possible, to be reporting about what she sees, what she hears. We're planning on having transcripts as well from court testimony. We are going to do our best to try to cover this case in full transparency as much as we possibly can for you, because this is a very important case. A lot at stake, a lot of different issues, and I know there's a tremendous public interest in it as well. Elizabeth Millner, fantastic reporting. Thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Love to be on.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.